Nigeria's ballooning debt profile is a major source of worry for the economy and its fiscal stability. The emergence of COVID-19 pandemic has worsened Nigeria's rising debt profile, as a recent report released by an international ratings agency, Fitch, shows that although Nigeria's economic outlook has been upgraded to stable, its new investment grade of B is not an investment grade. According to the recent report from the Debt Management Office, the federal government spent a total of 1.02 trillion naira on domestic and foreign debt servicing in the first quarter of 2021. This represents 35.7% year-on-year increase compared to 753.7 billion naira spent in the corresponding period of 2020. In another report by the National Bureau of Statistics, federal and state governments are owing a sum of 33.1 trillion naira in public debt as at March 31st, 2021. However, increasing costs of running government coupled with dwindling revenue has led to various state governments in Nigeria to formulate strategies to improve their revenue and revenue based through increase of tax, downsizing of workforce, increase in internally generated revenue, amongst others. Dr. Bongo Adi is a senior lecturer at Lagos Business School. He joins me now to dissect issues around debt. Good afternoon, Dr. Adi.
Good afternoon.
Yes, it's really great to have you join us on the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Let me start on this, that the federal government spent 1.02 trillion naira on domestic and foreign debt servicing. That's just for the first quarter of 2021. Now, this is an increase of 37.5% year-on-year compared to 753.7 billion spent in the corresponding period of 2020. How does this come to you?
Well, it's not a good sign. It signals government that is heavily burdened. Once again, we have gone back to highly indebted poor countries, so to speak. Because remember, was it last week that the debate whether Nigeria was rich or poor came up, and then we don't need any other evidence. I think that is suggestive of that fact that Nigeria has become a highly indebted, impoverished country. But the unfortunate thing is that we shouldn't be there. It is not where we started off with. If we cast our minds back some years ago, 2005 to be exact, Nigeria was taking off the debt hook. We were able to pay off all our indebtedness to the rest of the world. And then that showed up every economic indicator, the sovereign rating agencies, swooped on Nigeria. We had investment grade ratings. Our banks were all over Africa, even in London. Okay, so we were doing a emerging market index. We were top there, and then the narrative of Africa rising, started making the waves. So the question to ask is, how have we flung out of that in a very short period of time? How do we lose momentum? And then how do we lose focus? I think that's the question that we need to ask.
Now, looking at how did we lose focus, that's a very big question. This is a country that has been so dependent on crude oil proceeds, and at the end of the day, we've had issues we've had external shocks, and all of that has affected us as a country. But Dr. Adi, the argument sometimes is governments can borrow for some kind of projects, not to pay salaries or for consumption. And they also say that our debt to GDP ratio remains within the threshold. Can you explain this to us?
Well, yes. When you look at the so-called, you have the capital expenditure, you have the recurrent expenditure. But what is not usually accounted for part of the capital expenditure, because it's difficult to actually account for that, is the portion of the current expenditure that is spent by household, for instance, on education. Education is human capital formation, right? Or on health. Health is also human capital formation. Okay, so when you put that together, that is a huge contribution to capital formation in a system. Now, you can call them social capital or whatever, but they are significant. They are really capital. So imagine where a nation would be if it doesn't have the right skill set in the population. It doesn't have a competent population, educated people. Of course, they are not able to carry on the business of state and in the private sector. So education and health are very huge components of the capital expenditure, which are not part of the capital expenditure captured in the budget, but it comes from the recurrent expenditure. So when you look at it from that perspective, then we can justify government borrowing in order to pay salaries, because salaries, households have to use some components of their salaries to pay, to procure education services and health. So you cannot take it for granted. And of course, they have to also keep body and soul together, which is very important because a healthy population will be a productive one. If they're not healthy, they will not be productive, and your GDP will drop. So, and again, your health expenditure will ramp up. So those are some of the things that we have to look at, maybe justification for that. But I think that is not where the problem is, okay? Because most of the monies that have been borrowed or spent, especially by the state, okay, cannot be accounted for, all right? We are not able to trace them. I think that is where the problem is, the transparency and accountability. So if you are not able to follow the money, then that is a big problem. It's not just that government is borrowing, but they're borrowing for things that we cannot see at the end of the day.
Let's now look at revenue challenge. It's obvious this government faces this revenue challenge. Not enough money being generated from the agencies of government. Now, if we are to look inwards, which is a suggestion that experts would also make, do we really have that capacity to generate what is needed? It could not be, it might not be 100%, but I could actually help sustain or reduce our borrowing to a level.
Definitely, we do have more than enough capacity when you look at what we call the tax effort. Okay, tax effort in Nigeria is among the lowest. In fact, it's the lowest in Africa, right? The question that people keep asking is, okay, why do you tax the population? What's the justification? What's the rationale for people to voluntarily pay tax when government has not delivered on the dividends of governance? I think that's been it's always the poser that you get whenever issues of tax come up. But the fact remains that Nigeria is an undertaxed population, and that is because of the economic development path or the macroeconomic path or governance system that we adopted after independence. I always cite this example of what the late premier of the Western region, Awolowo, said to the House, the Western House, at the eve of independence. He said something like, there are two paths. Okay, one will lead to prosperity, growth, human capital development, happiness. But those who travel on that path pay tax. But there is this, that is a narrow path. But there is this wide road, okay, that leads only to doom, to tragedy, to impoverishment, to misery. Those who travel on it do not pay tax. They depend on government, revenue. I think that Nigeria made this choice from the beginning. We can look at what has happened with our fiscal strategy or fiscal system over the years from 1960. Okay, so and that's where the whole question about restructuring, hinges. So initially we had a system, okay, that tax, because the colonial system, if you go back to the pre-independent period, the colonial system was a taxing economy, right? People were paying all manner of taxes, and it was from there that the colonialists extracted, the resources, extracted revenue for remittance to the metropolis, that is to London, where the colony of Britain, right? So they taxed heavily, but that was abandoned at independence, not immediately after independence, as soon as we discovered oil. So nobody paid attention to taxes anymore. Nobody paid attention to internally generated revenue. Everybody got drunk on petrodollars. Okay? So that is how we got locked into this. So over the years, it has created an incentive system. And now I keep talking about incentive. People do not usually understand that. It's not just that people, do not want to pay, but there is some incentive system that tends to reward non-compliance with tax. Okay, people are looking for quick fixes, and the structure we have is that the federal government directly takes the revenue from source, from oil. So when they are taking the revenue from oil, they now decide how to dispense of it, who to get what. So it is no longer, so people no longer have responsibility, okay, over what government does. Government also, because it is not the people that pay the tax, that give them money or generate the government revenue. So they are also not accountable to the people, since they are directly responsible for selling the oil and taking the money. So you can see the kind of trajectory that it has induced, where nobody is interested in paying tax. Come on, why would I pay tax as a state? I mean, why would I think of collecting taxes from the population when at the end of the month there is money to be shared in Abuja as a state governor? I would prefer to go to Abuja and pay attention to whatever is going on at the federal, because that is where all the money comes. So it creates a negative incentive system for anybody to look at ways of diversifying the revenue source or the revenue pool. And this is that is what we are faced with in Nigeria today. Nobody has any interest in growing the revenue base. Okay, and it is going to be difficult to win people away from this dependency on petrodollars. Okay, that is the challenge. We are the largest economy in Africa, but we are the least taxed. Okay, so you need to ask me, okay, what do we need to do? How do we increase the tax rate? How do we improve and get more people into the tax pool? Government has embarked on so many measures, but of course, old habits die hard. People are still not so, it's not easy to get people, to win them away from a system that have got accounted. That system of slothfulness, of laziness, where everybody just looks to the federal port for everything.
Indeed, that's really a good way to talk about that. Now moving on, Dr. Adi, I want us to talk about infrastructure, which is key to economic growth. Nigeria cannot be left out. We've seen some improvements in regards to rail development, and also gas development. Government is focusing on gas now, trying to move away from PMS because of deregulation and all of that. Now, when you see deals like this, maybe with China, where there are loans and all of this, the public-private partnership issue now comes in. What do you make of our attitude when it comes to policies and, of course, respecting contract terms?
I think that's the big elephant in the room. The biggest problem in Nigeria is the respect for the sanctity of contracts. We have been known, we have created this impression that we are a contract disrespecting nation. And that has somehow bedeviled all the plans or the framework around public-private partnership. Okay, after that, countless number of times, that the only PPP, public-private partnership that works between the public sector and the government, or the public sector, the private and the public sector, is just one that has a very short duration, and that's not like, doesn't involve huge capital spending. Okay, but that would not be the real public-private partnership. Public-private partnership using project finance is for huge projects which has a gearing ratio of 80-20 at least, so you can have 90-10, where 90% is just debt and equity is just debt, right? So government is usually the sovereign authority that licenses or concessions, whatever infrastructure, and the private sector mobilizes the funding, the capital, the expertise, and all of that to execute. And then they will be directly responsible for user fees, and then they bear the risk, the commercial risk, economic risk, revenue risk, and all of that. So that goes away from the government. Now, when you have such a system around infrastructure, now any private interest would first of all do their financial modeling, Okay, so they will have their spreadsheet, and then they will have to look at all the paybacks and all the ratios to know whether there is value for money, as we always say. So when it is established that there is true real value for money, then they go on to execute the project, while government, stays out there and then receives whatever comes to the, depending on what the concession fees or something. But we have a system where, again, going back to what I said earlier, these governments, not successive governments in Nigeria, have no interest in engaging anybody. This is a system where government is what you call the proverbial Leviathan. Okay, Leviathan. That is what the government is. The government is sitting at the command height of the economy. It doesn't want to share. It doesn't want to engage. It doesn't want to partner. Okay, even if you have a change, in attitude today, another government comes in place, they are not interested because everybody is focused on what comes from the public purse, because government, given the structure, the legal framework, this structure that everybody keeps talking about, it prioritizes, this public concentration of power. And then when you have such, you do not want to share it. And then if public-private partnership means that government has to cede responsibility to private individuals, our government have not such interest. There is no incentive for that. Okay, it's only when incentive is driven such that you have a mechanism that will penalize people, okay, when they default on contracts or something like that, then you will see now people begin to toe the line. Until that happens, you will not see public-private partnerships succeeding in Nigeria. We've had all this, the whole thing about public-private partnership. You need to ask, how many infrastructure projects have we been able to put on the table on the PPP? There are not too many of them. Even the few ones that we've had in Lagos, for instance, the Lekki concession, the road concession, was eventually put back by government because I don't know really what happened. So it's been like stories after stories. We have not been able to do that. Again, all these feed into, or they derive from this, what I look at is the perverted system of fiscal system of Nigeria. Until we change that, which has something to do with macroeconomic restructuring, until we change that and make states responsible, fully responsible and accountable, you will not have such systems where engagement with private sector will be prioritized and where it will begin to yield fruit.
Dr. Bongo Adi, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining us to share your expertise with us on this very important topic. Senior lecturer at Lagos Business School, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, there you've heard from Dr. Bongo Adi. A lot needs to be done. Respecting contractual agreements is key in achieving infrastructure development across board.